Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live on the phone with me today, I have Christine Laird in Oklahoma City. Christine is the Manager of Talent and Business Growth at the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce. Previously, she was a senior recruiter for Kelly Services, where she was consistently recognized as a top performer both regionally and nationally. Christine, thanks for joining me today. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you both about your current job and your previous role. I think it's going to be super helpful for our listeners. But before we get too far into some of the questions, I talk to folks very often about the idea of working at a chamber of commerce, and they have often really not interacted with the chamber, so they're not really sure what the chamber is. So could you kind of explain, high level, like what is the purpose of a chamber and sort of what does a chamber do?
Absolutely. The purpose of the Chamber of Commerce is to be the voice of their respective business community, and we like to think of ourselves as the visionary organization in the region. And we also help promote elements that make Oklahoma City an attractive place for businesses and also for our residents.
That's great. Well, so from the chamber's perspective, are your clients, so to speak, are they like the small business owners? Who are your sort of clients?
We have a very broad and diverse group of clients, anywhere from organizations that have maybe 10 to 20 people to your large corporations that are headquartered here in Oklahoma City with over 1,000 or even 5,000 employees.
Oh, that's really great. Well, so I know you just got your job there recently, and congratulations, first of all, but tell me a little bit about your role and what are you doing there at the chamber?
Absolutely. I am one of two managers of talent and business growth here at the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber, and I am part of the economic development team. What's really unique about our economic development team is typically you will see many economic development organizations function as a partner of their Chamber of Commerce, but we are housed within the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber building, and I am part of a rebranded team, which was previously Business Retention and Expansion. Our new name is Talent and Business Growth. And what we focus on is engaging with existing businesses in the Greater Oklahoma City area, and we consult with these businesses to make sure that they're on track to reach their business goals. We capture important information such as job growth, capital investment, and future planning, and we also identify any opportunities that we have to be a better economic development partner in helping them reach those goals.
Wow, I love that. I mean, that's got to be so exciting. And you know that I grew up in Oklahoma and actually near Oklahoma City. And, in the last 10 years even, the city has just really done some tremendous things. So I've got to imagine that the role of the chamber has become, more and more critical to the city's kind of growth and success.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it's such a pivotal part that we play here in the community and really championing for a lot of important matters that affect our business community.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, so we talked, I'm trying to think, maybe a few weeks ago, and we were talking about Oklahoma City in general, and you mentioned that Oklahoma City is actually looking for new job seekers, like looking for talented people. And I mean, that really stuck with me when we talked. And the first thing, I guess, is, what kinds of industries are there in Oklahoma City that if we were looking for a new job, like that we might be wanting to consider Oklahoma City? Like, what are sort of the big industries there?
Absolutely. I'd be glad to share. Well, as you know, the energy sector has a huge presence here in Oklahoma City, and it touches multiple industries. But it directly accounts for only about 3% of the total employment in the greater Oklahoma City area.
Oh, really?
Which is yes. It's certainly a testament to our ongoing diversification of our economy. You wouldn't think that from the outside looking in, but that's a really fun fact.
Yeah.
And building upon the strengths of our oil and gas sector, our other significant sectors include aerospace, professional services, bioscience and healthcare, government, manufacturing, hospitality, and retail trade. Those are all what I would call hot industries in the greater Oklahoma City area.
Yeah, and when you say aerospace, I'm trying to think. I believe, so of course the Air Force has a base there, I believe, at least nearby. And then I think there's like Boeing and there's some other big sort of like aerospace related companies there, which is really interesting.
Yes, absolutely. We have a presence from Northrop Grumman. We certainly have a large presence from Boeing, and we also have a growing presence from up-and-coming aerospace companies as well, which all do tend to gravitate toward the Tinker Air Force Base area, which makes sense. But that presence is certainly growing and is certainly drawing the attention of engineers, among other top professional occupations.
The other company that I keep wanting somebody that I talk to go work for, one of my favorite companies is Sonic, the restaurant. And I know they're headquartered, I think they must be downtown from what I've seen. But I keep thinking that somebody should go work there at the corporate location and tell me what it's like.
I know. I actually went by Sonic last week to find that on their first floor they have some smaller suites, and I was looking for an IT-focused company that had actually moved. And just walking into their first floor, it's just so quirky, but it's also so inviting and fun. And yes, definitely, it looks like a really fun, cool place to work.
Oh my gosh, I should probably take a trip and go tour Sonic. That would be so good. Well, so the other thing about Oklahoma City, in addition to the jobs, right, is some of the sort of like amenities or the lifestyle. Like if you were going to pitch someone that was looking for a new city, if you were going to pitch them on, why we should consider Oklahoma City, like what things should we keep in mind?
Well, I think one really important aspect to keep in mind that a lot of our new development has come from is the decision to incorporate the MAPS projects. We are now on MAPS 3, which includes a new park, Scissortail Park, and that park is being built near the Wheeler District, which is on the south of downtown Oklahoma City, just across I-40. Mm-hmm. We also have a new streetcar system that is being implemented, and it seems like every week there's a new road that's being torn up, which for downtown lately, that's no surprise. Mm-hmm. But they are getting those rails put in, and that project should be completed within a year. They are underway right now building those rail streetcars.
Oh, it's so cool. I think, the other thing, the whole downtown is a really fun area with like restaurants and things to do. And overall, the cost of living in Oklahoma City is actually really reasonable compared to a lot of cities. So it seems like there's a lot of things going on there that would be attractive to like a young professional, but at a cost that's really reasonable.
You are absolutely correct. Oklahoma City residents actually spend 28.6% less than the national average on housing costs, and we are seeing a ton of new developments, primarily apartments in the downtown area, but also in the Midtown and Plaza districts. Because of the addition of John Rex Elementary School, there are more townhome-style houses going up, as well as condominiums, to attract those young families who have children that attend John Rex Elementary School in downtown Oklahoma City.
Oh, so it's a school in downtown, so if you live downtown, like your kids have a place to go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I think that's the other thing, just as a side note to point out, is that Oklahoma City, at least, so I went to school in Moore, which is just south of Oklahoma City, and they have really great public schools. At least the ones I went to and more were just phenomenal. And so it's another great option, not only for the low cost of living, but for the sort of high quality of education that's available.
Absolutely, yes. Moore is a great school district.
Mm-hmm. Well, so say we're looking for a job and maybe we aren't planning to move to Oklahoma City, wherever we happen to be, right? One of the things that people ask me about a lot is whether or not they should work with a recruiter or a headhunter, like an external recruiter. And I think the thing that's so lucky with you is that that's something that you did in a previous life, and you can kind of give us a little bit of insight on what that's like and what to know. So the first thing is, if we're thinking about working with a headhunter, what are a few things that we should consider? Like, what are the pros and the cons of it?
Well, the first note that I would suggest to consider is working within the different niche industries that certain placement agencies can be focused on. For example, in Oklahoma City, Excel Financial Staffing is very well known. However, they only focus on placement of finance professionals, while a company like Addison Group will focus on mid to senior level HR, IT, finance, and administrative professional roles. Mm-hmm. So taking into consideration that different staffing firms may have different areas of expertise, if you as a candidate know your background, of course, or where you may want to go next, I think linking up with the right placement agency that's focused in your area of interest is a great first step. And a pro, of course, the obvious one is helping the candidate secure their new career, but also helping that candidate expand their network and maybe even uncover opportunities in the market that they may not have been aware of. I know that, using myself as an example, when I met candidates that maybe I didn't have openings for that matched what they were looking for, I would either refer them to one or two other agencies that I felt could help them, or I would help introduce them within my network, or again, think about other companies that had openings that maybe I wasn't working with as a recruiter and give them referrals to say, hey, you should contact this person at this company. I am not staffing for this particular position, but I think you'd be great, and here's the information, because I think that it's all about putting the candidate's best interests at the forefront always.
Oh, that's a really good idea, and it's a really good tip. So I'm curious, like, if we've decided, it sounds like the thing that you're saying is that we need to really focus on, when we find a recruiting agency, making sure that they specialize in the kind of work that we do. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So say we've decided we're going to work with someone, we're going to find that person who specializes in what we do. How do we find them? Like, where can we, if we don't know anybody who already does this kind of work, like, where could we locate someone?
I think the best step to locate the right office would be to do some research online, whether that be your traditional Google search or even a search on LinkedIn. And once you hone in on, say, one or two placement agencies that seem to be locked into your expertise, I was always particularly impressed with someone who would walk in to my office to make that initial connection in person and already have that elevator pitch ready, because that shows you're focused, you know what you can bring to the table, you know what you're looking for, and someone who is that hungry, who is already that prepared, is definitely someone that I will want to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so the person who comes to your office and they're going to meet with you and they're prepared, how do they get in touch with you to come to your office? Like, do they email you? Do they give you a call? Like, what is, like, the best way?
A phone call would be great. Again, myself, I would always be impressed with people who even gave that pitch over the phone, especially if a lot of job seekers these days, and later years of my career found were passive. And it's hard to get away during work hours, and you're keeping your search confidential in many cases. And there were some phone calls I would receive during my lunch from time to time that people would blow me away over the phone saying, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I'm doing now, but it's key terms that I knew were very relevant to positions I had open. Just the light bulb went off, and I kept them on the phone maybe 15, 20 minutes. So here's my email, send me your resume, let's get something on the calendar. And it's really important for the recruiter to be flexible to those passive candidates. There's many times that I would be in the office until 7 or 8 o'clock at night to meet with those folks or meet with them during lunch to make sure that we got the proper time. Because a phone conversation and an email introduction is wonderful. Those are wonderful avenues. But it's very difficult to really hone in on what someone's looking for and understand their passion if you don't have that one-on-one interaction.
Totally. So the people that would reach out to you, call you, come in, give you a pitch, were they people that you already knew, or were they sometimes people that you'd never met before?
They were almost always people I never met.
And so I'm only asking you this because a lot of times when I talk to job seekers, their hesitation is that they don't want to bother the recruiter. Like, they don't want to be bothered because they don't know that person. Did it annoy you when these people would reach out to you?
If they knew what they wanted and what they were looking for, I welcomed that all day long.
Okay. Because for you, it sounds like it helps you as a recruiter. It helps you to kind of have your list of candidates that you could pick from when a job would come available.
Absolutely.
Well, so a question I get really super often, actually, if somebody has never worked with a recruiter and they're thinking about it, is they ask me, how is a recruiter, like who works at, let's say, an agency, like a Robert Half or something, like how are they compensated? Like how do they make money?
That is an excellent question. Compensation can be pretty fluid depending on the company that you work for. I have networking within the recruiting industry. I'd learned of different compensation plans, but I would say, using myself as an example, there was a base salary.
Okay.
And the base salary, because the commission structure for myself was not as high as some other agencies, I had a higher base salary, and the commission opportunities were not as frequent. And I was fine with that. There are other agencies that are structured with a lower base salary, but the commission opportunities are higher and they're more frequent.
Right.
So I think depending on your style, if you're very competitive in knowing that you want to take advantage of those commission opportunities and maybe forego a higher base salary, depending on what's best for you and what you're looking for. But let's see here.
So it sounds like from the job seeker side, if our question is, why does the headhunter work with me for free?
I see. Okay.
It sounds like the commission that they receive is probably when they place me as a job seeker into a job, that the company is paying them sort of a commission, like a finder's fee.
Yes, you are absolutely spot on. That's
okay.
True.
So that's why it's free, I guess, to work with a headhunter then.
Yes, absolutely. So what will happen is a company will call us and say, hey, I have this open position. I need your help filling it. They will be the entity to pay us, yes. So that's always free to the candidate from my experience. Now, in a headhunting situation, I'm not certain. I know in some executive search firms, there can be a fee involved. I'm not as well versed in that area, but I would say for your Robert Half's, for your Addison Groups, for your Express, Kelly Services, there's no charge to the candidate because the company does pay that fee.
Yeah, that's super helpful because I think that's really it's confusing. I think a lot of times to the job seeker, they're like, so what am I missing here? But I also get the sense, at least when I'm talking with job seekers, that sometimes like recruiters are really personable and we may feel really comfortable to talk to them and share with them all of our worries and our concerns and, feeling like we're having like a private conversation and that we are the customer in a way to that recruiter. At least from my perspective, I think it's important to sort of be careful what you share with the recruiter because they do have the ear of the hiring manager.
Yes, I would say that's correct. And I also would say that just as much as the company that's asked for your services is your client, the job seeker is your client as well. And I think having both best interest in mind, making sure that you're making that right match through the best fit, I think is really important, knowing what's best for the company that's hires you, but also keeping in mind what's best for your job seeker, because maybe the position that they applied for may not be the best fit, but maybe you have something else that's a better fit for them.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great, great point. Well, so you actually gave a really good presentation. You've given a couple actually at an event called Disrupt HR, which, well, first let me ask you before, so you gave a presentation at Disrupt HR called Salary Ain't Nothing But a Number. And before we go too far into my question, can you help us to understand what is Disrupt HR?
Disrupt HR is an event that can be hosted annually or semi-annually traditionally, but it is an event that primarily has an audience of HR professionals and other business professionals in the area. The speakers that are invited to Disrupt HR first have to submit a topic online, and the topic has to be, as you can, I'm sure, gather from my title, it doesn't have to be politically correct, so to speak. So you have to have an idea that to be considered as a speaker that would be kind of an out-of-the-box way of thinking in an HR world, because sometimes HR can seem so confined. Oh, we have to be careful to do this, or we have to be careful to do that. And Disrupt HR really gives a platform for people who are fully immersed in HR, or maybe some have some HR responsibility in their organization, to really express their free thinking ability to say, hey, you know what, this is a great new approach to employee engagement, and why has nobody thought about this? And it's your opportunity to, in a very limited setting by way of time, we have 5 minutes and 20 slides, and they auto-advance every 15 seconds. So
it's kind of intense.
Yes, very intense, and as I've been told, it's like TED Talk on steroids.
Sure. Well, so in your talk, I mentioned the title is Salary Ain't Nothing But a Number. You were basically talking to a group of HR people, and you were trying to convince them to put a little bit less emphasis on the job seeker's salary history in the middle of the interview process, because, you talked about, well, let me just ask you, so what brought you, what inspired you to give the talk? Why is this an important topic to you?
Well, at the time that I came about that topic, our economy was really in the peak of the oil and gas downturn.
Okay.
I had a lot of candidates coming to me that were making great money, and a lot of those positions didn't exist anymore, at least in that moment in time. And they wanted to reinvent themselves or rebrand themselves. And many, especially in our manufacturing industry, knowing that they could not compete with the inflated salaries that we often see in oil and gas, were hesitant to hire people who really would be great for the company, but in the back of their mind, their fear was, as soon as the market comes back, they're going to leave, because they're not going to, they say they want to be here and they want to learn and have a new opportunity to grow. But I feel certain that when the market comes back, they're going to jump ship. And there was a particular instance of a manufacturing manager position I had open that I was recruiting for. A gentleman that I met with got through all 3 rounds of interviews, and I was so certain he was going to get the offer. And at the last moment, the company I was helping went with another candidate. And the response that I received was that it was due to the salary and that my candidate made too much, and they were afraid that he would leave.
Doesn't that just kill you?
Gosh, it killed me and him just as equally, I'm sure. It was just a very deflating moment, and I thought, my gosh, why won't companies just take a chance and really believe? Because it's so cyclical. For people who have been in oil and gas for quite some time, they want stability. They don't. Money is great, but they want stability and they want opportunity to grow and learn and do something new. And it was just unfortunate to me that so many people were being denied that opportunity when they were trying to provide for their families.
I mean, this is a real issue, and it makes me really happy that you talked about it. I'm going to try to link to it in our show notes so that people can watch the show or watch your talk. But the thing is, a lot of times as job seekers, we may get turned down for this reason, but rarely is the company going to give us the honest feedback that, hey, it was your salary. You know, we may just get like the automated email, like rejection, like, as opposed to you kind of getting real feedback. So it's really helpful to know that this is a real issue that really does impact whether or not a hiring manager may choose to move forward, or an HR professional. Like, either way, it really could be part of our job search. Like, it could create problems. And like, for me, it actually reminds me, because I have had this problem where I've made too much, and maybe I've gone in and interviewed for something I was really passionate about, and man, I was so passionate about it, I would have done the job for free because it was such the right fit, and the company just couldn't see past the number. And so for me, I often try to look for ways to avoid giving the number in this situation, because I think, well, it's probably a better outcome than me giving the number and it, you know, causes a problem. But I'm curious, from your perspective, like, when a recruiter, let's say it's an internal recruiter, not even like an external recruiter, but when a company says, how much do you make? Like, that's often one of their very first questions. And say we're at a place where we really don't want to tell them, because either we're making too much or maybe we're making too little. And we're pretty sure they're going to overlook us, you know, if we reveal the number. Do you have any tips for us on like how we might handle this situation?
I would be glad to offer some tips. First, I believe if the salary question's being asked too soon, like you described, maybe in that pre-screening process or even during the first interview, what I would advise a good position to take is to state that you'd like to better understand the role before discussing salary. Another strong approach in the thick of the interview process, maybe say you're in round 2 or round 3, is to give a target salary range you'd like to be in, instead of stating what your current salary is. But in doing so, in giving that range that you'd like to be in, I would say definitely remember to do your research and consider whether you may be changing industries so that you give a realistic number. Because if you are changing industries and coming in as the lower man on the totem pole, so to speak, I think being realistic of the training that you would have to endure would be a good point to consider. And then also taking into consideration what the wages are, and again, doing that research for your particular market. I know in many cases, doing research for Oklahoma City as compared to other cities, like San Francisco, for example, those average wages for certain positions are going to be vastly different, but for different reasons, such as cost of living. So taking your skill level into consideration, but also the city that you will be within and where you may start out within the organization are all important factors to look at when doing your research.
I totally agree. And the places where you can do research, I would look at sites like salary.com and glassdoor.com. You know, they offer information that's both by city, like on salary, you can look up by city and title. And on glassdoor.com, you can actually go down to the company level at a certain city and you can look by title what they're paying. So it can really help the job seeker. I would also say, you know, you mentioned giving a range. I think that's an excellent idea. If you do give a range, be comfortable with the low end because if you give a low end that you refuse to take, it's not helpful to anybody.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, so what if we go through this whole process? Maybe the idea of pay like never comes up. We get to the end and we get a job offer, which is great. And let's say that the pay is actually lower than what we were expecting, or maybe there's less vacation than we wanted. How can we go about asking for more, either money or vacation or whatever it is? Like, how can we ask the recruiter for more?
Oh, my goodness. I love this question because I think if your recruiter knows you well enough and they see that offer, they're going to be ready to go to bat for you before they even make you the offer. I think that especially in my direct hired candidates that I worked with, which in that instance, you are interviewing candidates, they're interviewing with the company, and if they're made an offer, they have the chance to be a direct W-2 employee from day one. So they're not going through this temp to hire process. And that was the most fun for me because of the salary and benefit negotiation. I would pin down my candidates' minimum, ideal ranges, and we would talk about benefits. Where were you at? Where would you like to be at? Now, keeping in mind, making the offer to a candidate that it's less than the candidate and I discussed, I would never answer on behalf of the candidate without consulting them first. For example, if they wanted $45,000 but the client offered $40,000, I would not go right back to the client and say, nope, we're going to go for $45,000. You have to consult the candidate first because you don't want to speak to the candidate without their consent, and it's such a critical matter. But the candidates that I helped in those scenarios were always so pleased that I went to them and I would say, you know what, this isn't even what I would always say we because we're a team. This is not what we wanted. I understand that. So with your permission, what can we counter offer? I think you have to know your candidate inside and out, and your recruiter has to, they have to know, you have to have that much of a transparent relationship so that they know what you want. And there were a couple instances that I had a lowball offer come through for a candidate, and I had just as transparent of a relationship with the hiring manager. I said, I will offer it, but I really don't think they're going to take it. And they didn't. And we worked out something better. But I really think that negotiation on that level, your recruiter has to be completely on board, and I think establishing a minimum and ideal requirements with your recruiter so that they're aware what you would and would not accept, because that relationship has to be transparent and you have to be on board as a team to make sure that you're getting what you want out of that offer.
Yeah. So it sounds like negotiation, when you get an offer, it sounds like it was a pretty normal part of the process.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Because I think as job seekers, we're sometimes afraid to negotiate because it feels so weird and it feels like it's outside of the box of what's normal, and like somebody's going to get offended and maybe we're going to lose the job if we express that we want more, or that kind of thing. But it kind of just sounds like this is just part of the deal.
Yes, and I think, too, another important piece is establishing requirements when you present that candidate. For example, there was an executive assistant position that I was working on months ago, and the salary range was between $50,000 and $65,000, pretty broad range, and I had 3 outstanding candidates, and for each candidate, I said, okay, this is the salary range. I'm going to give you 2 options. Either we can present you without a specific number tied to you in that range, so therefore you'd be saying you're open anywhere from $50,000 to $65,000. Or if you have this number that is going to make you change careers without even giving it a second thought, let me present you at that number. For example, if your magic number is $60,000, this is my candidate, have the write-up, and then at the very end of the email, the minimum requirement, 60,000, I never had a hiring manager flinch at that because they knew up front, okay, if I offer this candidate, this is what they're looking for. It's within the range, but that makes sure that when an offer is made, and it doesn't always make sure, but for the most part, make sure that that candidate's not going to get a lowball offer.
That's a really interesting point, and I think that comes down to really working closely with that recruiter and trusting the recruiter. It actually makes me think of sort of another question, which is, and I don't know, you may have never kind of come across this, but I've worked with job seekers before who maybe worked with a recruiter that maybe didn't present them exactly accurately. Like the recruiter would ask them to send a Microsoft Word version of their resume, which is not that unusual, but the recruiter maybe would go in and sort of like change their title and, make them look like they're a slightly different person than they were. And the candidate would kind of find out about it later. That kind of stuff worries me a little bit because I feel like, if you go into a new job and you've given incorrect information, like that could be a reason for termination. I'm kind of curious, like if we're looking for a recruiter and we want to find someone that we trust, are there any signs of like a good recruiter versus a recruiter who may, do things that we might not be comfortable with?
My gosh.
That's kind of a difficult question, I know.
Yeah, it's a great question because in my career, I learned that you have all these different staffing companies out there, but just because the company has a great reputation doesn't mean you're going to get connected with a great recruiter. Mm-hmm. In contrast, just because you're working with, you may have a really awesome recruiter at this company, but when they leave, the next recruiter won't be as awesome. So your perception of the company may change as well. I think that, and maybe LinkedIn would be a good tool to research and see which recruiters maybe are posting a lot of helpful information to show maybe that to give that indication that they're passionate, because something that really transcended for me was my passion, and the candidates that I worked with, they would see it, they could feel it, even if I didn't find them something, just to take the time to sit with them and maybe refer them somewhere else or to help them network within the community. That's still a service and that's still impactful. And I think that it can be tricky to find those metrics-driven recruiters versus the ones who really do it for the right reasons with the passion that really truly want to help people. And like you'd mentioned, there's really no clear answer I can give to find that person. But I think LinkedIn is a great research tool to look at different recruiters within your area and see the content that they're posting. I think that can give a really good insight as to maybe the type of recruiter that they are. And then, of course, that one-on-one conversation, if you have a chance to have that one-on-one conversation, really sets the tone.
Yeah, I would say probably maybe also listen to your gut, like in those one-on-one conversations, if the person starts saying, I changed your educational history a little bit, or I changed your experience, like if you're like, ooh, that seems weird, like listen to yourself.
Yes. I would never change someone's resume without consulting them first, and I would always send them the edited version and let them approve it before I sent it off to anyone. But not everyone's going to do that.
Well, it's like one thing to help the candidate look better, like to shine the best light possible on what they do. Like that makes sense, and it's helpful when a recruiter like is helping you in that way to update your resume. But it's really different if like they change your job title completely and they start trying to make it look like you do something that you don't.
Exactly.
I mean, that does
and those
happen.
Are the ones you want to avoid.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Well, that answers my question. So the other thing is, earlier you mentioned a situation where you presented like 3 candidates for a particular job. And I know there's always a chance that, the recruiter may talk with us, they may really like us, but for whatever reason, maybe we weren't one of their top 3 that they presented to the company or to the hiring manager. Do you think it's ever appropriate, like if they've told us, hey, I'm not going to present you for this position, is it ever appropriate for us to go to the company website and apply directly with the company, or is it kind of off limits at that point?
That's a good question.
I mean, I guess it's kind of an etiquette thing. I get this question sometimes when I work with job seekers because they're not really sure. They're like, well, they said they weren't going to present me. I'm not really sure, but I'm still really interested in the job.
And, to your point there was one position I remember recruiting for, and this was earlier this year. There was a candidate that I met with that I thought would be pretty great. I wasn't 100% certain, and due to some other circumstances during the interview process, I didn't present her. And I didn't tell her that I didn't present her because our communication fell off. And I found out later why, but I had the hiring manager for the position I planned to present her for contact me and say, this candidate said that they were working with you, but I don't see that you presented her to any of our positions. May I go ahead and set up an interview for her?
Oh, interesting.
I thought, so in this instance, I was proven wrong, I think. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with applying online for the position that the recruiter chose not to present you for. If the recruiter did not receive any feedback about you not being a good fit, because it would certainly look like egg on the candidate's face, I think, to go and apply online for the position knowing that the recruiter received feedback that they wouldn't be a good fit. That wouldn't make sense. But that would be my opinion on that particular instance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so say we go through the whole interview process with the recruiter. It doesn't work, but we really like this recruiter. Will they stay in touch with us? Like, will they work with us again, or do we kind of just get one shot and then we're out?
I think that there's certainly an opportunity to work with that recruiter again. I mean, as an example, I primarily recruited for customer service positions with Kelly Services in various departments, but only within one major employer here in the Oklahoma City area. And if a candidate was not a good fit for one department, it was rare that they could interview for a similar role within a different department in that same organization.
Yeah.
So because of this scenario, I was rarely able to place a customer service candidate in a role that was not within that organization. So I would do recruitment by way of research online to see if there were other customer service roles I could present them to that maybe I didn't have a contract with this company yet, but I was going to present them anyway because I knew that they'd be a darn good candidate. And in some instances, for example, with that customer service scenario, this often resulted in me not having any other available opportunities that I already had with companies who were contracted with me. So in that instance, candidates would sometimes find positions on their own, or they would link up with other placement agencies, because if they checked in for customer service positions, say a week or two down the road, I would tell them, thank you so much for checking in. Unfortunately, I don't have any new customer service positions at the moment, but I will certainly update your availability and keep you in mind. And I always assumed that that candidate was going to seek out other recruiters, and they were also going to continue to look on their own. So if I didn't hear from them again, I would check in, and if they didn't call me back, then I would assume they probably found an opportunity on their own. But I don't think that it would mean you wouldn't have an opportunity to work with that recruiter again. I think that they would do some work to still try and place you somewhere, but it would also depend as well what positions are available at that time and what might be available in the market that they can actually tap into.
That makes sense. So if we want to stay in touch with the recruiter and we kind of want to just touch base every now and again, is email the best, or, I mean, how's the best way to stay in touch?
I would always suggest email for myself because people always knew I was a one-woman show in my office.
Right.
So people always knew email, and it went to my cell phone. That was the best way to check in with me. Phone calls are great, too. If people just left voicemails for me, I would just go ahead and mark them down as available. But I highly preferred email because I could always go back and update availability that way, and I had record of it.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, this is so helpful. So my last question, Christine, is where can we go to learn more about you and your work?
The best place to go would be my LinkedIn profile. I update that regularly with position information as well as any activities like Disrupt HR that I'm working on, and sharing helpful content as well as much as I can about opportunities in the Oklahoma City area and what's going on in Oklahoma City. So LinkedIn is definitely the best way to reach me.
Perfect. Well, if it's okay with you, I will put a link to your LinkedIn profile inside the show notes.
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, Christine, thank you so much for joining me. This has been excellent.
Well, thank you as well. I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope that your listeners found value in our discussion today.
Absolutely, and I hope they'll check out Oklahoma City. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and thanks to those of you who sent me questions. You can send me your questions to Angela@CopelandCoaching.com. You can also send me questions via Twitter. I'm at Copeland Coach, and on Facebook, I'm Copeland Coaching. Don't forget to help me out, subscribe on iTunes, and leave me a review.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.